Hey everybody, what is up? So I want to give a big thank you to Mr. Jimmy Fungus for inspiring me after almost 20 years to watch The Green Mile. I mentioned the books that I have of The Green Mile from when they came out, and he wanted to know about if there's any differences between the movie and the books. There are quite a few differences. I was actually thankful that I have my old books because it really made things easier to do comparisons. The reason being is that as you're watching the book, after you read the book and if you watch the movie, it kind of gives you a little bit more of an idea what's going on. And by the way, if you've not done either, there are spoilers here. I'm going to say that this is probably one of the best adaptations of a book that I've seen. And I don't see that very often. The reason being is that obviously they're pushed for a certain time limit, and in the books, one of the biggest things they take out, and I'm kind of glad they did, to a degree, is there's a guy by the name of Dolan who works in the retirement home that Paul's in, who is a complete and utter jerk. He kind of at times he reminds Paul of Percy. That's one of the biggest things that is kind of like, Percy's attitude was, well, I know people, so he has a relative and who's in a higher position, higher place, where he could get him the job at the prison and eventually get him to where he wanted to move on to the state mental hospital. Elaine, who is one of the people that lives in the retirement home with Paul, and the one he tells the story to in the movie, in the books, her grandson is actually the Speaker of the House. I think it's on the state level from what I saw. And she tells this to Dolan, so it's kind of like a split, because she tells him, you'll never be able to get a job here in these places, and they don't hear Paul say, you'll be in the breadline, which during the Depression, there were a lot of people who would get in these lines to try to get food. And so, yeah, it's a split of Percy's personality versus the threats that, he would make about how they could lose their jobs, and the fact that the warden talks to Paul about Percy, and they're talking about they're hoping that he does move on because they're sick and tired of him. A couple things is like Percy did beat Della a couple times, but they don't show that in the movie, which I'm thankful for to a degree. Yes, Percy does have Yes, Percy basically does want to kill Mr. Jingles. It drives him crazy that the mouse is in the house. Literally. Coffee being brought in was one of the, I hate to say it, when you see them bringing the vehicle in and it's scraping the ground almost, you're thinking, oh my god, what's going on? And then you see Coffee walking out and you're like, okay, this is a perfect fit. Everyone who starred in the movie was a perfect fit for it. One of the other differences is that instead of telling Elaine, the full story, he's basically writing stuff down. He lets her read it, and then she starts asking questions, and he tells her, how people died. She asks him how his wife died in the books, and he doesn't want to tell her. And it actually is in the end of the book. I'm not going to spoil it. It's a tearjerker. It really, truly is. So, Bitterbuck's death, I love the rehearsal because what Toot says as they're taking him through the process, he knows it by heart. They admit in the book that they've used him countless times for the rehearsal, and he'll add stuff in to be a smart ass. So I appreciate that. I really do, because they left what he said in there. They do leave out parts about Bitterbuck's family, how they want to do things for the execution. So there is that part, and what they say It's kind of close at when they're, when they're dying. Dell just pisses Percy off to no end. I looked through the books and was trying to find it. Just, there was something about Dell and what he must have done or something like that, where he just taunts him time and time again. The part about the cigar box, he can go, oh, let's get the cigar box and we'll get the cotton for bedding. That's not in there. The way Mr. Jingles acts throughout the movie is the same. They do talk about Mr. Jingles passing. I love the end of the movie where Mr. Jingles pops up from underneath the door, and Edgecombe starts talking to him, and he picks him up, and he goes, hey, let's eat a few crumbs or whatever. And I think that was really them showing Mr. Jingles passing away. I don't know, because it's odd. He could be dreaming, because Coffee did talk about his dreams and stuff that happened. In the end, Paul kind of is scattered, gives his speech, but he doesn't necessarily say that his long life is an atonement for going through with the execution of John Coffey, because Coffey, it's not really implied, but in a way it is. Coffey's death was him committing a form of suicide, because he could have, figured out a way to defend himself. He could have had them help him defend him, but ultimately it's like what Edgecombe's wife said. If nobody's going to believe it, there's nothing to say. In truth, when Billy was killed, in the book he was actually sleeping. And he, in the movie, was standing up. He's taunting Percy. What he did to make him piss himself is in the books. I think that was a better change of actually having Billy alive than just having Percy shooting him, because I kind of thought it was cowardly that he would shoot a man in his sleep. That was going with the character Percy. I really think that was the biggest change that they made that really helped some of the deal, because he does end up in the ward like they talk about, but also is kind of, it makes you ask, okay, what did Coffey do to make him kill him? Because Percy is crying when he goes to shoot Billy. He is. And so Coffey had shown Paul what happened to the girls. He does in the book. And so you almost wonder if whatever he put into Percy was a part of that, because we know that when he sucked the illness out of the warden's wife, he was holding it in. They're like, he's going to choke, something's going to happen. But I think it was part of Percy's punishment for everything he had done. Beating up Dell, messing up Dell's execution. I mean, seriously, when they show that moment as he's on the chair, we don't find out what happened until afterwards of how Coffey was reacting. In the movie, you see Coffey reacting to it and how Mr. Jingles got that longevity. And I really think that was the case. I think that was his punishment. If you don't know what happened, if you're watching this without seeing the movie or reading the books, because you're curious, the character Percy is this basic, spoiled, rich, I would say kind of richest kid, because he has family that is very influential. During Dell's execution in the electric chair, you're supposed to wet the sponge. He doesn't. for whatever hateful reason that he has, he basically decides, screw it, I'm not going to soak it, the sponge, and he puts it on his head dry. And he had been told the sponge had to be wet because it basically sent the electric current into their heads like a bullet. With them talking about the way Dell was executed, wow. I mean, in the book, they're describing it in more detail than you'd ever probably seen in the movie. They're talking about, like, flesh falling off and all this other stuff, and the picture it paints is more gruesome. But even showing him dead afterwards, I'm surprised Percy really didn't get the crap kicked out of him. And when they throw him in the padded room, to me that wasn't just punishment, because Percy had basically said that if he got to be the one to do Dell's execution, you know, being the one to say everything that they go through, he would put in his resignation, and it would have been a while before he got it, the new job. He got what he deserved. I will say that. Billy got what he deserved for what he did to the girls. And Paul not being able to defend Coffee, you know, that was the worst part. But Coffee wanted to die, and in the movie he talks about it's his atonement for killing one of God's miracles. But there's kind of something odd in that, because basically Coffee takes on the weight of the world. He knows how people are feeling. When he walks into the execution chamber room where people are watching, he talks about this hate. You have 4 guys standing around him that cry because they know he's going to die no matter what. And him not asking to have the mask on his face isn't both. And he talks about he's afraid of the darkness, but he doesn't really talk about why he's afraid of the dark. And I think part of it has to do with the fact that the Warden's wife talks about how she was in the darkness and she found him, and it's basically attracting people to Coffee for help or finding their way. Could that be it? I don't know. You know, Coffee is the same in the book as he is in the movie, and the weird thing is, when you talk about Coffee, you have to go back to, and I know this is a little out of sequence, but it's easier for me to think about things this way. Paul goes to talk to Coffee's lawyer, Hammersmith, and I'm so thankful they cut a lot of that out, because basically the way he talks about Coffee, Hammersmith, and comparing him to a dog, there's a lot of that. And it really shows the racism of the time, that it is still abundant there, and there are people that see things differently, but other people don't. And when you have these 4 guys standing up for a guy that they've never done before, you know, that says something, where they see what Coffee's doing and they think it's such a horrible thing. Coffee wants to die, though. He has the weight of the world on him, and he goes, I try to take it back. And you can tell that he's trying to take back the illness that the world's put in the person. And there is a point where when Paul is talking to Hammersmith admits that he tried to find more about Coffee, and he has sent Coffee's picture to somebody in another state, and the guy's like, yeah, that's about right for somebody who worked for me. But still, you know, he ends up just like he fell out of the sky. And I think that really leaves a lot more to it. Let me see here. because of the fact that it kind of gives you this idea this guy's been wandering around trying to work through things as he goes through life. And it makes you wonder, where did he come from? I'm trying to find the exact deal where they're talking about taking coffee. I talked about this a little bit in the other video that I took down. Yes, I had a video I took down. I know a couple people saw it. I did it because I wasn't happy with it. Let me see here. The word in hell asks John how Coffee's doing, and he eventually says he'll be fine. And it says, how can so much good and so much evil live together in the same man? How could the man who cured my wife, be the same man who killed those little girls? Do you understand that? Paul, I told them that I didn't. The ways of God were mysterious. There was good and evil in all of us. Ours not to reason why. Hacha hacha, read-do. Most of what I was told were things I learned in the Church of Praise Jesus. Lord is mighty. Hal nodded the whole time, looking sort of exalted. He could afford to nod, couldn't he? And yes, and look exalted too. There was a deep sadness on his face. He was shaken, all right. I never doubted it, but there were no tears this time, because he had a wife to go home to, his companion to go home to, and she was fine. Thanks to John Coffey, she was well and fine, and the man who had signed John's death warrant to leave and go to her. He didn't have to watch what came next. He would be able to sleep that night in his wife's warm while John Coffey lay in the slab in the basement of County Hospital. Growing cool as the friendless, speechless hours moved for his dawn, and I hated Hal for these things. Just a little. And I'd get over it, but it was hate all right. The genuine article. Now, I wanted to read that because you have 4 guys who took John out of prison, who basically found out that was Billy that killed the little girls. And he basically, Coffey rescued this guy's wife, and that part is powerful because it shows that the Warden didn't care about what happened to Coffey. He saved his wife. That's all he cared about. And to me, that was kind of an ironic part, how they're talking about good and evil, when Coffey's not evil. Coffey is something we can't really explain. He takes things out of people, but he can give back. He took what was in Hal's wife, Melinda, and he gave it to Percy. And Percy must have seen something. I truly believe that. Maybe he saw what was in Billy's heart in a different way. I think it drove him to the brink of madness. Maybe there's something else. Maybe something from the darkness that Coffey won't talk about. I mean, Coffey wanted to die. And the way he describes it is like glass shards in his head. And he's just tired of everyone in the world being cruel to each other. When he talks about, he had never seen a Flicker show movie, and they show him this one, he goes, they're angels. It really makes you stop and think how he knew something like that. And he tells Paul, and in the movie, in the book, I never really saw it, he tells Paul what to say when he's being judged. Because Coffey knows so much about people, he can see what's in their hearts. I don't think it was Paul's atonement that gave him this long life, and why he has to see people die. Even when he talks about his roommate dying, I'm sorry, the one in the, in the home, it's not his atonement to die. Something in Coffey was willing to give John that long life. Did he inject that life in him? I don't know. Because the question is, how old was Coffey? How long had he been down on Earth to feel all this pain? Did he live a long time? And I think those are questions that people are going to ask that you can't get from a movie or a book. And I think King made the right choice, because it really makes you question so much, how much evil there is in the world, and how, we feel at times like there's so little good. Maybe that's what he's saying, that we need to be better. And maybe Paul's atonement might be from all the people, not only Coffee that he took the life of, but all these other people that were on the mile, Sorry. Trying to throw this into a basket and didn't work. So yeah, I think that's it. Was Mr. Jingles an accident like they talk about in the movie and the book? Possibly. I don't know. Nobody does. And I think that it was best written that way. Even though John has lived to see his friends die and everything else, and the death of his wife, you gotta read it. You really do. I think that he was given a chance to tell the story, to try to give people an understanding of maybe hope, maybe a way we can change. It's all ideas, but the fact that he had such a connection to Dell, Coffee did, that he felt his execution where he did it with Bitterbuck, I think that says a lot. I really do. Because even though everybody was there for killing someone, Dell basically said he wished he knew Paul and Brutal and Dean and Harry, because the way they treated him and how much difference there was. There are differences when they talk about these things so much in the book compared to the movie, but you have to ask yourself, when you see both, is there a deeper message between what we're seeing? And ultimately, what I think the movie's message was doing in the end was more of kind of like a religious thing, with more Paul having to pay a price for everything he did, versus him talking about the things that he'd seen in life and the way people react to those things. And he does, in both the movie and the book, he and Brutal both leave death row after Coffee. And I think it's just not sadness about what they did, but seeing an innocent man being executed really opened their eyes, I think, to what was going on at the time. And even today, we can take some of the same lessons and look at it. That's it, everybody. I hope you like this. By the way, one other thing. I still gotta give props to the guy who played Percy, because trust me, like I said, that dude was awesome. He was a total jerk-off. Pardon me for saying that, but it's true. He acted the same way. So, yeah, that's it. Talk to you later. Take care. Hope this worked for y'all.